Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and for the first 24 hours of Catch Cup, Niantic messed up. During the anniversary event, some trainers were able to obtain Great League legendary Pokemon, and they were banned from the Go Battle League. However, Niantic forgot to ban it from the Catch Cup, so for the first 24 hours, those Great League legendary Pokemon that aren't supposed to be in the game were actually allowed. So today we're taking a look at footage submitted by a member of the community, Maki DK, who's showing off for the very first time Cobalion in a 1500 combat power format. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. And in game number 1, he picks up a very strong lead, leading Morpeko into Oinkologne. Well, on paper this should be a very strong lead since Oinkologne now runs Mud Slap, but I imagine Body Slam from Oinkologne is still going to be hitting for some pretty massive damage onto the glassy Morpeko. Morpeko lands Drill Peck. There's a beautiful catch and sneak as the Body Slam is going to be absorbed onto Tinkaton. Body Slam really not going to be doing much. Mud Slaps, however, are going to add up pretty significantly. Tinkaton, not wanting to take any extra damage, launches Bulldoze. Oinkologne puts up the shield and pivots into Galarian Corsola. Considering there is a Great League Cobalion in the back, this is an extremely important bait out. Cobalion wouldn't really be able to do much of anything into the Corsola, but Tinkaton can put up one heck of a fight. Tinkaton trying to make Gigaton Hammer number 2, opponent fires off the Nightshade, they're not going to let that happen, but now back in comes Morpeko. This is only a Nightshade, they did not build up to the Power Gem, and Nightshade is going to be resisted, so that's a very easy no shield, and now Morpeko can punish with a full Peck farm down. Opponent brings in their own Tinkaton as their final Pokemon, and from here, Cobalion should be able to close out the game. Drill Peck gets a little bit of chip damage, in comes the Oinkologne, but the Oinkologne's charge attacks are completely walled. Oinkologne goes for the Body Slam, my goodness, Great League Cobalion has some pretty good stats. Back in comes the Tinkaton, but it's just simply too little too late. Cobalion lands the Sacred Sword, that's very nice damage. They're going to fire off Bulldoze, but I just don't even think Cobalion even has to respect this. Cobalion will put up the shield, does get debuffed, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We move to game number 2, we've got a battle of flyers leading Morpeko into Shadow Altaria. The Shadow Dragon Breaths are adding up quite a bit. Oh, there's an attempt at a catch. Was the opponent able to react in time? They threw one Dragon Breath after the switch, and they did. Great reaction time from the opponent as they're able to connect with the super effective Flamethrower. Opponent now sends out a Volt Switch Fortress, and Volt Switch Fortress is a pretty big core breaker for this team. Opponent's going to have to throw energy here because if they do not, then a second Gigaton Hammer will be reached. This Gigaton will be putting massive damage onto the Fortress. Fortress barely hangs on, and unfortunately, Fortress has a ton of super effective damage here. In comes Cobalion hoping for the Blind Rock Tomb. They did go for the Blind Rock Tomb, but there's the Sand Tomb catch back onto the Morpeko. Opponent in absolute shambles as they throw 2 charge attacks. Neither one lands on its intended target. Back in comes the Altaria, but this Morpeko is loaded. Drill Peck lands, Morpeko farms down, and now the opponent's going to send in their final Pokemon, which is once again going to be Tinkaton. In this meta, there's going to be Tinkaton on basically every team due to the fact that a Calm Day occurred pretty recently. In comes Cobalion. Cobalion's going to have to no-shield the first, but Cobalion is going to have a pacing advantage over the Tinkaton. Tinkaton does get the Bulldoze debuff. Cobalion has to watch for the catch attempt. There it is. The opponent does not get it, and that is going to secure the win. As Cobalion just has charge attack after charge attack after charge attack loaded here. Sacred Sword lands. Opponent seems pretty content to just lose with both Protect Shields intact, and Cobalion is more than happy to oblige. Bulldoze is shielded. Opponent gets another debuff, but it's just simply not going to matter. Cobalion double kicks down and takes the win. Familiar lead in the next match, Morpeko once again into Oinkologne. Opponent save switches into the Tinkaton, and that's swiftly going to be answered by Cobalion. It felt like last game every Bulldoze was debuffing Cobalion. This Bulldoze thankfully does not, and I imagine without a Bulldoze debuff that Cobalion should actually win this matchup. Sacred Sword does do some pretty considerable damage. It looks like the second Sacred Sword will barely miss the knockout, but maybe with the double kicks, Cobalion can prevent a third Bulldoze from being reached. Unfortunately, Cobalion's luck runs out. It does get debuffed there. Cobalion now deep into the red HP. Sacred Sword will be shielded, but Cobalion is at the back-to-back. Is the opponent really willing to double shield in this matchup? Yes, they are. Aggressive pivot into the Tinkaton, because Tinkaton up energy, and when the opponent has no shields, basically has no counters. Opponent goes for broke. They fire off Gigaton Hammer. They pivot into the Oinkologne, but Oinkologne is going to take monster damage from Gigaton Hammer. Gigaton will connect. Tinkaton never really has to shield anything here because all the Oinkologne can do is go for Trailblaze. Now the Mud Slaps do add up quite a bit, but no charge attack pressure is pretty nice for the Tinkaton. Tinkaton will try and take the knockout with Bulldoze. Oinkologne, however, is very bulky, and even with a Bulldoze debuff, Tinkaton cannot farm down. This is a boosted body slam. Tinkaton barely hangs on. Tinkaton exits very low on energy, and in the back, it's going to be a Volt Switch Fortress. This would be a pretty terrible matchup for the Murkrow, but Murkrow is up a shield. Drill Peck connects, that's monster damage. Does the opponent ever consider going for the Sand Tomb here? They do go for the Sand Tomb. They're trying to ramp up the Volt Switch damage. Murkrow watches for the switch, but unfortunately will have to fire off energy at the Tinkaton. Going for an undercharge on the Drill Peck. Drill Peck will still take the knockout. Back in comes the Fortress. Tinkaton does have a move loaded, but it does lose charge attack priority. He's going to wait the timer, send in Cobalion, and go for the peekaboo play and snipe with the Bulldoze. Bulldoze will not be enough to take the knockout here. It does get the debuff. It's going to be a race. It's a simultaneous KO, and somehow that game will end in a win. Bit of an awkward lead in the next match, Murkrow into Clodsire. Clodsire is just very bulky, so Murkrow can never pick up a one-hit knockout. Opponent actually pivots out, they send in Togekiss, and even for a Tinkaton counter switch, Kiss Up energy can prove to be very, very tricky. Aura Sphere lands, Tinkaton more than happy to absorb that damage. Tinkaton gonna go for a Bulldoze bait. Does the opponent decide to call it? Will they put up the shield? They do put up the shield. Bulldoze does not get the debuff, but does help save Tinkaton just that little bit of extra energy. If Tinkaton can potentially force both shields and farm them into a range where Drill Peck could KO, that would be a massive swing of momentum. Tinkaton will force the shield. There's the pivot. In comes Murkrow. But Murkrow doesn't throw the Drill Peck. Togekiss is saved, and in comes the brick wall named Tinkaton. This is tragic. Murkrow has all the energy it could ever ask for, but against Tinkaton, it's really not going to be doing a lot of work. This is a rare moment when even 3 charge attacks from a Murkrow cannot take the knockout. Tinkaton able to shake off that damage. Tinkaton will have to fire off some energy here, but they're probably just going to go for a Bulldoze. Murkrow puts up the shield. They do go for the Bulldoze. Murkrow just trying to save energy, but they get sniped down by Togekiss. And unfortunately, there's just no path forward in this game. Cobalion is guaranteed to have an Aura Sphere land. There's still the Clodsire lurking in the back. And the fact that the Togekiss was preserved, unfortunately, ends up being game losing. Togekiss fires off the back-to-back Aura Spheres. Tinkaton gets farmed down, and the opponent is going to take the win with a 3-ball flex. Great lead in the next match, Murkrow into Poliwrath. Is this a counter Poliwrath or Mudshot? It's going to be the Mudshot variant. Mudshot has incredibly fast pacing, but then again, so does Murkrow. Murkrow winning charge attack priority. If the opponent's staying in this matchup, that means they're absolutely core broken to smithereens. No shield from Murkrow, Icy Wind hits for huge damage. Opponent should probably try and go for a catch here, but they don't. Maki predicts the catch, but the opponent just stays in and gets the double debuff onto the Murkrow. Murkrow can now double up on Drill Packs, waits the turn, opponent gets a catch and a sneak onto Gourgeist. Well, I definitely see why they had to stay to the Murkrow lead. If their switch into a Murkrow was a Gourgeist, then they are incredibly core broken. Opponent overfarms too much, and that's gonna let Tinkaton make Gigaton Hammer. Gigaton connects, that does huge damage onto the pumpkin. While Tinkaton will survive Shadow Ball, it is gonna put it very, very low. Shadow Ball lands, Tinkaton survives, opponent ends up under tapping there, so they really do not want Tinkaton to make another move. They just went for the Seed Bomb, in comes Cobalion. Cobalion gets a double kick down of a Ghost type. Cobalion up a bunch of energy as back in comes the Poliwrath. Will Poliwrath get knocked out by the Sacred Sword? Yes, they were low enough. The final Pokemon, what do you know? It's always going to be Tinkaton. And up energy and up a shield, Cobalion is going to be able to close out this matchup. Cobalion just always has to no shield the first, because if the first Bulldoze debuffs, then the second Bulldoze would be a very big problem. And this Cobalion, I swear, all it does is get Bulldoze debuffed. Cobalion will put up the shield as another Bulldoze comes through, but Cobalion will get to double up on Sacred Swords momentarily, and that's going to secure the win. Sacred Sword number 1 is going to land onto the Tinkaton, going for Sacred Sword number 2. The opponent realizes they cannot win the game, and they will concede the match. We see a familiar matchup in the next match, Murkrow into Altaria. Will he try for the catch? No, it's actually the opponent going for the catch, and they catch the Drill Peck onto Tinkaton. Man, I think it's been 100% of games so far that have Tinkaton. It does make sense though, because with the Calm Day, it's a very meta Pokemon and everyone now has access to one, whereas more often than not, people won't have a lot of consistency across the Pokemon that they built throughout a season, unless something was released or something had a Calm Day. But with Tink getting a brand new move in Gigaton Hammer, everyone had to rebuild it. Cobalion will take the knockout with Sacred Sword. Back in comes the Altaria. Altaria overfarms pretty significantly, could have even farmed up even more, but they'll fire off the Sky Attack and take the KO. In comes Tinkaton. Opponent reveals they have the Volt Switch Fortress in the back, and this is very bad news. Tinkaton will fire off the Bulldoze, but unless this Bulldoze debuffs, This is going to be a very difficult game. Honestly, even with the Bulldoze debuff, this is still probably going to be a loss. Fortress just gets to ramp up its damage with Sand Tomb after Sand Tomb. Murkrow tries for a Sand Tomb catch, but unfortunately does not get it. The opponent's now going to fire off Rock Tomb. Suddenly, Murkrow's damage has been heavily reduced. Murkrow, very low on HP, and will finally get to fire off energy. Drill Peck into the Fortress will be shielded. Fortress gets the farm down, and there's just no way out in this game, unfortunately. Instant no shield on the Sand Tomb, and the opponent just gets the farm down. It's Altaria getting the triple resistant farm down. That is absolutely brutal. Gigaton Hammer lands. Altaria does get that farm down, and the opponent will take the win. Great lead in the next match. Murkrow into Diggersby. Opponent's going to be safe switching into Spiritomb, and look at Murkrow doing a little bit of core breaking. Murkrow launches Drill Peck. This is going to hit for way too much damage. Spiritomb is not a tanky Pokemon, but unfortunately now they're down a shield, and they're met with a Tinkaton. Shadow Ball will hit for big neutral damage, but Spiritomb can't ever really farm down after because Sucker Punch is going to be resisted. Tinkaton overfarming massively, full sending Gigaton Hammer, wanting to secure the knockout or the final shield. Opponent's just going to let that Spiritomb go, and instead they're going to bring back in the Diggersby. But Diggersby's Mud Shots honestly don't do a lot to Tinkaton. Gigaton Hammer is going to very easily two-shot, and that's going to force Diggersby to fire off energy, because if they don't, another Gigaton Hammer is going to be reached, and that is just going to be knocking out the Diggersby. In the back is Aegislash, and Aegislash is a very bad Pokemon for Cobalion to see. Cobalion just farming up as much energy as it possibly can, farming to 100, and now I'm going to start to spam out these resistant Sacred Swords. Man, that Sacred Sword does absolutely nothing to Aegislash. Cobalion is going to no-shield. Can Cobalion survive a Shadow Ball? It would be pretty sick if it can hold on here. Shadow Ball lands. Look at Cobalion. Cobalion lives and is now going to go for the harder-hitting Stone Edge. Stone Edge lands for huge damage onto the Aegislash. In comes Murkrow, and Murkrow is just going to very comfortably peck all the way down and take the win. Aegislash goes for the Gyro Ball, but the bulk on this Great League Cobalion is crazy. Tanking a neutral Shadow Ball, that's not something most Pokemon can do. His team picks up a pretty rough lead in the next match, leading Murkrow into the Voltwitch Fortress. Voltwitch Fortress proving to be a very consistent core breaker into this team. There's a safe switch into Tinkaton as the opponent hopefully undertapped the Rock Tomb. And they did. Rock Tomb resisted on the Tinkaton. Fortress can stay in here and apply a Sand Tomb defense drop as well, but in doing so, this does very heavily misalign the switch timers. Sand Tomb lands, there's a pivot into Dusknoir, but Dusknoir absolutely has to respect the -1 Gigaton. This is a Shadow Dusknoir. They no-shield and they pay a very heavy price, as now they're going to be forced to shield a Bulldoze or lose the Dusknoir. They shield the Bulldoze. There's the pivot into the Murkrow. Murkrow is just going to shield once, farm all the way down, and exit with energy to threaten that Fortress when it gets brought back in. Back in comes the Fortress. This Drill Peck is going to hurt. I don't think it will quite take the knockout onto the Fortress, but it will get the Fortress very low. Fortress may get a Sand Tomb debuff onto Cobalion, but it's going to be Cobalion up a shield versus the world. Timer hit 0. In comes Cobalion. It's Mightyena in the back. There's nothing they can do. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Picking up a disastrous lead in the next match, Murkrow into Morpeko. A save switch into Tinkaton, but Morpeko can always stay in here and launch Electric Ore Wheel to guarantee huge damage or a shield before they pivot out. Morpeko switches into Hangry form and switches off the field as in comes Fearow. Tinkaton overfarms, going for the Bulldoze bait. This is double resisted. Will they fall for it? Yes, they will. Fearow puts up the shield, but does not get Bulldoze debuffed. Tinkaton will take massive super effective damage from Drill Run, but will hang on here to make the Gigaton Hammer. If the opponent's really willing to double shield, then Morpeko is going to be left shieldless. They want to save the shield for Morpeko. Down goes Fearow, and back in comes the mouse. But Morpeko unable to get the farm down. The last second Bulldoze reached by Tinkaton is going to pressure the final shield. No debuff once again, but in comes Cobalion. Cobalion will respect the Electric Ore Wheel, as that would do quite a lot of damage. The opponent's now going to be boosted, but their Ore Wheel is going to be in Dark mode. And Dark Ore Wheel not going to be doing a ton of damage. They pivot out to reset the Ore Wheel back to Electric, but in doing so, they have reset their attack stat back down to 0 as well. In the back, it's Tinkaton. Tinkaton will slowly chip away at this Cobalion with these Bulldozes. Bulldoze number 1 is going to connect. There's the Bulldoze debuff, but Cobalion is already at the back-to-back Sacred Swords, and it's going to need it because Tinkaton will be able to hang on. But Morpeko does have an Aura Wheel loaded, so now it all comes down to this. Will we see a catch? No, just staying on the field, and the opponent resigns the match. Clearly, they didn't think they had any more win cons. There's a big surprise on the lead in the next match as Morpeko leads into Gastrodon. Seeing a Gastrodon in the Catch Cup is a massive, massive surprise because that means that post-Mud Slap nerf, this opponent ended up building a Gastrodon. Gastrodon is a shell of what it once was, so it's a bit of a surprise to see a trainer build a Pokemon that is no longer meta. They do farm up a ton of energy and are threatening Gigaton Hammer. Cobalion thinks about it, puts up the shield, gets the shield call right as they full send the Gigaton. Now Cobalion can farm up to the back-to-back Sacred Swords. The first Sacred Sword will not quite take the knockout here, but maybe with a double kick down. No, a 1 HP survive from the Tinkaton. Tinkaton gets the last second Bulldoze, but now it's Cobalion's turn to live on 1 HP. Back in comes the Gastrodon, but at the very least, Cobalion will get some nice chip damage as it fires off Sacred Sword. In comes Morpeko, there's the pivot out. In the back is Togekiss for the opponent. Morpeko will look to grab a shield advantage with the Drill Peck before sending in the Tinkaton. The one worry is that this did misalign the switch timers. And anytime there's a misaligned switch timer, the opponent will have the ability to bring back in the Gastrodon, and they're actually on a Flamethrower on the Togekiss. What is this? That is not the Aura Sphere I was expecting to see whatsoever. Bulldoze is going to be shielded. Bulldoze does get the debuff. Opponent overfarms too much. Had they just been going for the double Aura Sphere, they could have burned the timer and then pivoted out and then saved that Togekiss. But by flamethrowing, they messed up their pacing and they weren't able to take advantage of the desync of the timers. And that game will end in victory. All in all, big thank you to Maki DK for sending in this footage. That is a really high rank Cobalion as well. It gets to a good combat power, pretty good PvP stats, so that is an incredible collector's item. Now, it goes without saying, this Cobalion will probably not be unbanned for quite some time. I would imagine, unless they have another rule set snafu with a future cup, that Cobalion is probably going to stay banned in the Great League until Shadow Cobalion eventually releases in some Rocket event down the road. So for now, it's just cool to see what could be, because Cobalion in the Great League does look like it would be a very playable Pokemon. It has very good pacing, it has an incredible typing. The only reason we haven't seen a Fighting plus Steel type have some pretty good PvP success in the Great League is because the Fighting plus Steels are Lucario, which even though it has an amazing moveset, just really doesn't have the stats to back it up. Whereas Cobalion absolutely has the stats to back it up, and would at bare minimum be anti-meta if it was ever released for the Great League. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.